The full moon illuminates Peppa Pig's house with cold silver light, but tonight the moon brought an ancient curse with it. Strange sounds come from the forest behind the house, wild howling echoes through the quiet village. Peppa cannot fall asleep. Something scratches at the window. Shadows on the walls take frightening animal shapes. George cries in his little bed, pointing at the window. A large furry shadow flickers behind the glass. Mummy Pig comes to comfort the children, but freezes. In the yard, she sees huge paw prints. Daddy Pig checks all doors and windows of the house, but locks won't help against what's already inside. Susie Sheep comes in the morning with bad news. Her wool is disheveled, eyes full of fear. Danny Dog and Pedro Pony tell about a strange beast. They saw its silhouette in the moonlight. Madame Gazelle knows old legends about the curse. She warns children not to go out at night. Granny Pig finds strange prints in the garden. They lead straight to the family's house. Grandpa Pig remembers his grandfather's stories about one who transforms under the full moon. At night, the family hears scratching on the roof. Something big and heavy walks above. Strange sounds come from the attic, growling and scraping. No one dares to go upstairs. Peppa sees glowing yellow eyes in the window. They stare directly at her from the darkness. The werewolf appears in the house, but doesn't attack. It searches for something very important. The creature speaks in a human voice about ancient debt. The family must return what ancestors took. Mummy Pig understands this is their family's curse. The werewolf will come every full moon. The family finds an old amulet in the house basement. This is what the mysterious guest sought. The werewolf takes the amulet and vanishes into the night, but its yellow eyes remain in memory forever. In the morning, all traces disappear, but the family knows truth. At the next full moon, it will return again. Peppa looks at the moon and sees a silhouette. The werewolf watches the house from a distant hill. A sunny morning at Peppa Pig's house seemed ordinary and joyful. But outside the window, in the shadow of old trees, danger was already waiting. Peppa was playing in the yard when she saw Susie Sheep. Her best friend looked strangely pale and silent. Susie silently pointed to the dark forest behind the house. Her eyes seemed empty and lifeless, like glass. Peppa followed her friend to the edge of the forest. The trees looked threatening, their branches reaching like bony hands. Susie walked deeper into the forest in silence. Peppa began to worry, but continued to follow her. The forest became darker and thicker. Sunlight barely penetrated through the dense crowns of trees. Strange sounds came from the depths of the forest. Cracking branches, whispering wind, and something even more ominous. Susie stopped at an old hut. The house looked abandoned, but smoke was coming from the chimney. The sheep pointed to the door of the hut. Her movements were mechanical, as if she were a puppet. Peppa noticed that Susie's shadow was wrong. Instead of a sheep, the shadow resembled a hunched old woman. The door of the hut creaked and opened by itself. Strange green light and the smell of herbs came from inside. Susie entered the hut first. Peppa hesitated, feeling that something was wrong. Inside the hut, a cauldron with bubbling potion was burning. Dried herbs and strange objects hung everywhere. Susie approached the cauldron and turned around. Her face began to change, wrinkle and age. The sheep turned into an old witch with a hooked nose. Her eyes glowed with malicious green fire. The witch laughed with an ominous laugh. She had deceived Peppa by taking the form of her best friend. Peppa tried to run away, but the door slammed shut. The witch began reading a transformation spell. Green smoke enveloped Peppa from all sides. She felt her body beginning to change. The witch continued to cast spells, stirring the potion. Peppa was turning into a small wooden doll. In the morning, parents found only a toy pig. The real Peppa remained forever a prisoner of the witch. Children's crying can still be heard in the forest. The witch is looking for new victims, taking the form of their friends. Local children no longer play near the forest. They know that you can't always trust even your best friends. Peppa Pig's house always seemed like a safe place, warm and cozy. But none of its inhabitants even suspected what dark secrets were hidden here, behind familiar walls and cheerful children's laughter. Grandpa Pig stood at the doorstep but wouldn't come inside. His eyes seemed empty and cold, like glass. Peppa called Grandpa to come in, but he only smiled strangely. The smile was too wide and unnatural. Grandpa Pig said he couldn't enter without invitation. His voice sounded hoarse and mechanical. Mummy Pig invited Grandpa to come in, but he continued standing. Something prevented him from crossing the threshold. The family noticed that Grandpa cast no shadow. Sunlight passed through him as if he were a ghost. Grandpa Pig told about his meeting with Baba Yaga. The old witch offered him a deal in the dark forest. Baba Yaga promised Grandpa eternal youth and strength, but in return demanded his soul and ability to enter homes. Grandpa agreed to the deal, not understanding consequences. Now he couldn't enter houses without special invitation. Baba Yaga appeared near the house, laughing with creepy laughter. Her yellow eyes glowed in darkness. Teeth were sharp. The witch said that Grandpa now belonged to her. He must bring her new victims for deals. The family understood that Grandpa was no longer who he was. Baba Yaga turned him into her servant. Grandpa Pig asked family not to invite him anymore. He feared he would harm them against his will. Baba Yaga disappeared in clouds of smoke, taking Grandpa with her. The family remained alone, trembling with fear and sadness. At night, they heard Grandpa's voice outside window. He asked to let him in, but family knew it was trap. In the morning, strange objects lay at doorstep. Baba Yaga left them as reminder of her power. Peppa learned important lesson about greed and deals. Some offers are too good to be true. The family never saw real Grandpa again. But sometimes at night they heard his sad voice in wind. The house became a place of caution and wisdom. Peppa's school had always been a place of joy and fun. But today something changed in the familiar atmosphere. A new student entered the classroom with a mysterious smile. His eyes glowed with a strange green light. Madame Gazelle introduced him as Merlin. All the children immediately loved their new friend. Merlin performed amazing tricks during breaks. Flowers appeared from thin air as if by magic. Peppa and her friends were delighted. No one noticed the dark shadows around the wizard. Merlin told them about his house in the forest. He invited everyone to a party on the weekend. The children gladly accepted the invitation. Parents allowed the children to visit their new friend. On Saturday, everyone gathered at the forest entrance. Merlin greeted them with a wide smile. The forest path became darker and darker. Trees whispered something ominous in the wind. Merlin's house looked strange and frightening. Windows glowed with the same green light. Inside the house were many strange objects. Cauldrons bubbled and books flew through the air. Merlin offered the children special treats. Something suspicious was steaming in the cups. Peppa was the first to sense something wrong. Her friends began behaving strangely. The children's eyes became empty and lifeless. They moved like enchanted dolls. Merlin laughed with an evil laugh. His true face finally showed to the children. He was an ancient evil wizard. For centuries, he collected children's souls for his spells. Peppa tried to escape from the house, but doors and windows were locked by magic. The wizard began casting a spell. Green light enveloped all the children. Peppa screamed, but her voice disappeared. She felt her will leaving her body. Now the children will stay in the forest house forever. They will serve the evil wizard, and a new student will appear at school. The story will repeat again and again. Lost parents. A sunny day illuminated Peppa Pig's house, filling it with familiar laughter. Peppa and George were playing in their room with the bunk bed against the wall. Mummy Pig was cooking in the kitchen while Daddy Pig read his newspaper in the living room. Everything seemed normal, but a subtle tension hung in the air. Suddenly, a strange humming sound came from the sky. Peppa looked out the window and saw a large, dark ship hovering above their house. A bright beam of light descended from the ship, enveloping their parents. Mummy and Daddy Pig froze in place with empty eyes. Aliens in silver suits entered the house through the open door. Their faces were hidden under dark helmets, and their movements seemed mechanical. They silently took the parents by the hands and led them toward the exit. Peppa and George hid behind the sofa, trembling with fear. They watched as their parents obediently followed the aliens, as if under hypnosis. The ship made a low humming sound and disappeared into the clouds. The children were left alone in the empty house. Peppa took George's hand and spoke with determination. They had to save Mummy and Daddy, despite their fear. Time was against them. Peppa found Grandpa's old star map in the attic. Strange symbols and coordinates were marked on it. George pointed to a bright star that pulsed with red light. The children built a rocket from cardboard boxes and old parts. Peppa drew control buttons while George added wings. Their homemade ship looked naive, but was full of determination. The rocket took off into the night sky, leaving a sparkling trail behind. The stars seemed cold and distant, and space greeted them with silence. Ahead, the aliens' red planet flickered. On the alien planet, everything was gray and metallic. Tall towers stretched toward the sky, with strange machines crawling between them. The air was heavy, and the sky was purple. Peppa and George snuck to the main tower where prisoners were held. Through the windows, they saw their parents in glass capsules. Mummy and Daddy Pig were sleeping deeply. Robot guards patrolled the tower corridors. Their red eyes scanned every corner, and their metallic feet clanged on the floor. The children hid in the shadows, barely breathing. Peppa found a control panel with many buttons. She pressed the green button, and the capsules began to open. The parents slowly woke up, blinking and looking around. An alarm pierced the air with red light. Robot guards rushed toward the tower, their metallic voices echoing through the corridors. The family had to run immediately. Together, they rushed to the exit. Peppa led the family through the maze of corridors, while George watched for robots behind them. Their rocket waited on the landing pad. The family climbed into the rocket and took off at the last moment. Robots fired laser beams but missed. The red planet grew smaller outside. At home, dawn and birdsong greeted them. Mummy Pig hugged the children while Daddy Pig smiled proudly. The adventure was over, but memories of bravery remained forever. Peppa and George told their friends about their space journey. No one believed their story, but the children knew the truth. Sometimes the most incredible adventures happen to ordinary families. The aliens. A sunny day illuminated Peppa Pig's house, filling it with familiar laughter. Peppa and George were playing in their room, where the bunk bed stood against the wall, George below, Peppa above. Mummy Pig was cooking in the kitchen, and Daddy Pig was reading a newspaper in the living room. Everything was as usual, but a light, barely perceptible tension hung in the air. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Susie Sheep stood on the threshold, but her gaze was unusually empty, and her movements were stiff. She wasn't smiling as always and wasn't jumping with joy. Her eyes stared straight ahead, unblinking. Peppa opened the door and shouted joyfully, but Susie remained silent, only slowly nodded her head. Her usual white wool seemed dull, and her pink dress looked strangely faded. The family gathered in the living room to greet their guest. Daddy Pig put down his newspaper and smiled, but his smile quickly disappeared. Something was wrong with Susie. Susie slowly raised her hand and pointed out the window. Everyone turned and saw a strange green light flickering beyond the hills. The light pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. Mummy Pig nervously laughed and offered everyone tea, but when she turned to Susie, she had disappeared, simply dissolved into thin air, leaving only a faint green trace. George started crying and hid behind Peppa. His favorite dinosaur fell to the floor, and, strangely, the toy also began to glow with the same green light. Daddy Pig approached the window and looked outside. The green light became brighter, and now they could make out the silhouette of a huge ship hovering above their house. Suddenly, all the electricity in the house went out. Only green glow penetrated through the windows, painting everything in an eerie shade. The family huddled together in the center of the living room. A strange sound was heard, as if someone was scratching the glass with claws. The sound came from all sides at once, surrounding the house. Peppa held George's hand tightly. The door slowly opened by itself. In the doorway stood figures resembling their friends: Pedro Pony, Danny Dog, Emily Elephant. But their eyes glowed with the same green light. The friends entered the house, moving synchronously like robots. They didn't speak, only looked at the pig family with their glowing eyes. Their movements were mechanical and frightening. Mummy Pig tried to talk to them, but they didn't respond. Instead, they raised their hands and pointed at the family. Green light began to emanate from their fingers too. Daddy Pig grabbed the children and ran to the back door. But when they ran out into the yard, even more friends with glowing eyes were waiting for them there. They surrounded the family from all sides. George shouted, "Dinosaur!" And his toy suddenly came to life, turning into a real dinosaur, but with green eyes. The dinosaur roared, protecting the boy from the strange creatures. The green light became so bright that everything around disappeared in a white flash. When the light faded, the family found themselves inside a spaceship, surrounded by pulsating walls. In the center of the ship stood a huge screen, on which appeared an image of the real Susie, enclosed in a green cocoon. She was alive but sleeping, and next to her were cocoons with other friends. A bodiless voice spoke in a strange language, but somehow the family understood it. The voice explained that they were studying friendship and wanted to take all friends with them to space. Peppa bravely stepped forward and said that friendship cannot exist in captivity. She explained that real friends must be free and choose who to be friends with. The green light began to flicker and dim. The cocoons dissolved, and the real friends woke up. The aliens understood the lesson about friendship and released everyone home, disappearing into the night sky. In the morning, everyone woke up in their beds as if nothing had happened. But when Susie came to visit, she told about a strange dream about green light. Everyone laughed, but Peppa noticed that George's toy dinosaur was still faintly glowing green. Peppa Pig's house always seemed like a safe place, warm and cozy. But none of its inhabitants even suspected what dark secrets are hidden here. Peppa plays in her room when she hears strange laughter from the basement. What is this sound that makes her tremble with fear? George finds an old red hat with yellow pom-poms in the garden. The little one doesn't know that this discovery will change their lives forever. Daddy Pig goes down to the basement for tools and freezes in horror. In the corner stands a figure in a bright costume with a white face. Mummy Pig prepares dinner, but her hands shake with fear. Behind the window flickers a shadow with red balloons. Grandpa Pig tells the children an old legend about a clown, but he doesn't say that this clown is real and very close. Granny Pig finds old family photographs in the attic. In each of them, the same sinister figure stands in the corner. Peppa and George play hide and seek, but someone is playing with them. Red balloons appear in the most unexpected places in the house. The family gathers for dinner, but one chair remains empty. Who has been sitting at this table all these years? At night, Peppa wakes up from strange scratching in the walls. Something moves between rooms, leaving behind the smell of an old circus. George disappears while playing in the garden. Peppa finds only his favorite dinosaur and a red balloon. Daddy Pig searches the entire house looking for George. In the mirror, he sees the reflection of a clown waving at him. Mummy Pig calls the police, but the phone only makes creepy laughter. There's no help to wait for. They're alone with him. Grandpa Pig confesses that he has known about the clown all his life. This house was built on the site of an old circus where a tragedy occurred. Granny Pig reveals the family secret. Pennywise, the clown, has lived here for 100 years. He feeds on children's fears and never lets anyone go. Peppa goes down to the basement to look for her brother. In the darkness, yellow eyes glow and a whisper is heard. We all float down here. The family finds George in the basement, but he's not the same anymore. His eyes have turned yellow and his smile is too wide. Pennywise appears before the whole family in his true form. Now they understand. The house was never their home. In the morning, neighbors find the house empty. Only red balloons float through the rooms, and mirrors reflect silhouettes of the vanished family. A new family moves into the house a month later. Children run happily through the rooms, not knowing that someone in the basement is patiently waiting for their turn.